Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. Welcome to Sign for More Injury Funding, the podcast for all who want to learn about legal funding and its significance in personal injury, medical malpractice, trucking law, workers' compensation, right share, and many other types of law practice domains. I'm your host, Laura, founder and CEO of More Injury Funding, the legal funding counselors with passion for law, medicine, legal funding, and heart for all suffering individuals. In today's episode, I have an honor to be talking to attorneys Aaron Maples and Brendan Connick with Maples Connick Gulf Coast trial lawyers practicing law in 3 states, Louisiana, Georgia, and Alabama. Today, we'll be discussing multi-state practice and strategies for a successful law firm startup. At the end of our episode, I prepared a fun pop-up question for our guests, so stay tuned. Welcome to my show, Aaron and Brendan.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank
Absolutely.
you.
Absolutely. So good to have you both. First off, congratulations to your dynamic duo on the successful launch of your law firm. May your dedication and passion lead to a bright and impactful future in the legal world. You took the hardest step, and I can only imagine it did not come without challenges. What challenges did you face, and what are the most common difficulties that new law firm startups have overall, Aaron?
Sure. So again, thank you for having us. We're happy to be here with you today. We faced a lot of challenges, but the two foremost challenges that come to mind are the same that every firm faces, whether they've been practicing for 10 months or 10 years, and that's cases and capital, right? Every new firm is wondering where the cases are going to come from, and every new firm is wondering how they're going to fund the firm and those cases. In terms of cases, we were fortunate enough that, Brendan and I are not baby lawyers, so to speak. We've both been practicing for over a decade. And so we have reputations and referral networks that we've been able to call upon and just let them know that, hey, we're here and we are open for business. And then capital is unique. It depends on what your personal financial situation is and how much you can personally afford to dedicate to the firm. And then also, today, just like your company, there's a number of options available out there for startups to tap into to obtain funding to start a new firm.
Absolutely. Thank you for explaining it so thoroughly. How can new attorneys, Brendan, effectively assess the market demand for their legal services?
Well, as Aaron said, we aren't necessarily new attorneys. We've been practicing for over a decade. So it's a little bit easier for us than if you are a new attorney. We have a better taste of the market. But I think for a new attorney, for someone fresh out of law school, uh, you know, the best thing to do is to lean on the certain market areas that are kind of underutilized. It's criminal law, areas like immigration law, family law, estate planning, and things like that.
I get it. Thank you. What are the advantages and disadvantages of different business structures, let's say LLC versus partnership versus corporation and so on for a law firm, Aaron?
Sure. So I think it's an easy choice personally. I would recommend anybody that's just starting out to set up an LLC. An LLC is easy to create and it provides liability protections from your personal assets that partnerships do not. Corporations can provide the same types of liability protections, but typically require more formal record keeping and operation. And while there can be tax benefits to structuring your firm as a corporation, or at least to taxing your firm as a corporation, you can expose yourself to personal liability if you don't follow all the rules and regulations required to operate the corporation correctly. On the other hand, the main benefit of a partnership over an LLC is simplicity of setup. It requires minimal paperwork, basically no formalities, and it can be a good choice for new firm owners. But typically speaking, it can expose your personal assets to liability. So I think the easiest choice, in my opinion at least, is an LLC.
Okay, okay. How should a new law firm approach the decision-making process regarding its structure, Brendan?
Well, I think it's based entirely upon your business experience and what your goals are. If you're someone that has experience operating a business and you feel comfortable that you can handle all the requirements that go along with operating a corporation, then, by all means, go that route. However, if on the other hand, you've never run a business before, like Aaron said, an LLC is the best route because it's the simplest to run and to operate. Um, But regardless of which way you go, I would recommend that you speak with a tax professional before you make a decision so you fully understand the tax consequences of whatever decision you decide to make.
Well, that's good to know. Let's talk about funding and financial planning for a minute. What is your view on some effective strategies for funding a law firm startup, Aaron?
So you mentioned two distinct things in that question. One is financial planning, and two is funding. I think it's important to answer your question in that order because step one is you got to have a plan. And in order to have a plan, you got to have a budget. You got to sit down and you got to write out every single expense that you anticipate for any given year. And then you need to leave space for some unanticipated expenses because they're going to come as well. I mean, there are bar dues, malpractice insurance, rent if you're going to have a physical office, tech subscriptions. The list goes on and they add up quickly. So as far as funding goes, once you have a financial plan in place, once you know what your budget is, then how you go about funding, what strategy you use is going to be really entirely dependent on your personal financial situation. Before you make this leap, you need to not only understand your business needs, but also your personal financial needs. You need to know how long can you go without income? What do you need a month at home to stay stable? And then you can make the decision of how much personal capital you can allocate to the business and then make up the difference with different funding options that are available.
These are very good, very important key points to remember for the new law startups. How important it is to have a financial plan. We talked briefly about financial plan, and what are the key components that should be included in that plan, Brendan?
Well, to piggyback on what Aaron said, I mean, having a financial plan is everything. If you spend a few minutes online researching, you'll see that statistically it can take a law firm anywhere from 1 to 3 years to turn a profit. So I think having that plan for how you're going to weather the initial storm is absolutely vital. As far as the key components go, the most important is a budget. You have to know what's going out and how you're going to pay for it. Apart from that, if you're fortunate enough to be turning a profit early on, you're going to want to have a plan in place for distributing those profits and addressing your tax liabilities.
Mm-hmm. When we think of marketing and branding, what are some effective marketing strategies based on your experience for a new law firm like yours trying to establish its brand, Aaron?
Yeah, so that's a tough question. We are first and foremost trial lawyers. We're not, social media influencers or marketers, so to speak. For us, I think what was important was to understand first who we are and then try to build a brand that reflects that. I mean, the name of our firm is Maples and Connick, and we are the brand, so to speak. And once we understood that, we then had to figure out how we could build a brand, that reflected who we are as individuals. We provide services across the Gulf Coast. We're family people. We wanted to get away from the stuffy law firm kind of traditional vibe and show a more approachable touch. Even though we are tough in the courtroom, we didn't like the tough guy plaintiff's lawyer marketing approach. We think that's a little dated. So we wanted to build a brand that reflected who we are as people. We're approachable, down-to-earth individuals who enjoy trying cases and really want to make change across the entire Gulf Coast.
And it truly shows on your website, on your social media. I'm a live witness of that.
Thank you.
How can social media and digital marketing be utilized by startups to attract clients, Brendan? And I know Aaron had mentioned, that you guys are not gurus or professionals in social media, but how can it work for you?
Yeah, that's true, but social media it's extremely valuable for startup firms. I mean, because the truth is, you can't compete financially with the bigger firms out there, the Morgan and Morgans of the world, when you're just getting started up. So because you can't out advertise them, what you need to do is reach out to your network of people and other professionals and let them know who you are and what you're doing, what type of cases you're handling and things like that. I think social media offers us an easy way and a cost-effective way to get the message out. It allows us to give people a window into our world, so to speak. We can show them that what we do in courtrooms and what we do in press conferences without having to pay for a commercial.
Hmm. That makes sense. Technology, of course, plays a vital role in today's business and everyday life, really. What technology tools or software are essential for a law firm startups to operate efficiently? What does your firm use and why, Aaron?
Yeah, so a lot of people will tell you it's harder than ever to start a new firm. In our experience, I think it's the exact opposite. I think it's easier than ever because of technology. In terms of what tech we use, I think it's essential to have a solid case management platform. We use a company called Clio that has cloud-based case management software that allows us to access our files from anywhere, whether that be in Atlanta or New Orleans or Mobile. We have our entire case file on our phone or on our laptop at any given point. We use a virtual receptionist. We use AI on a daily basis to synthesize documents and help with drafting. All of our research is done online. The options for running an efficient practice by utilizing technology are really endless today.
Hmm. And the virtual assistant, isn't that the same as AI?
Yeah, no. So our virtual assistant that we use, it's actually an individual that answers the phone,
Oh,
but they take all the information and synthesize it and get it back to us using AI.
very interesting. A strong client base is essential for law firm growth, sustainability, reputation, and it leads to ongoing growing business referrals, opportunities for expansion. What are some strategies for building a client base in the early stages of a law firm, Brendan?
Well, I think this is simple, but it really is everything. You treat people the way that you want to be treated. And what I mean by that is you answer the phone when the clients call, you treat them with respect, you listen to what they have to say. They're going to be your biggest advocates, and they're going to refer you more cases. There's an old saying, where do you get clients? Well, you get them from other clients, and we've seen that to be true. I can't tell you how many times I've sat on the phone with folks and talk to them about their situation that they're going through. And I don't handle that type of work, but I will still take the time with them to hear them out, and I will try to find the best lawyer that I can that does take their cases and that will help them. And you'd be surprised how that comes back to you when those people do have a case that you'll take. They'll come back and refer you more, and it continues to grow from there.
Word of mouth truly works miracles, no doubt there. Um, Aaron, do you believe that networking events and referrals are important in client acquisition?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think networking, professional networking is second only to what Brendan was talking about, which is client maintenance. Um, no matter how many cases we're handling at a given time, there's going to be another firm out there that has higher volume. Some practice areas just have higher volume, whether that be workers' compensation or criminal defense or family law. They're going to see more clients, talk to more clients on a daily basis than we ever will as trial attorneys. And so getting out there and letting people know, hey, we're here, we handle those types of cases. We're in Alabama. If you run into a case that you're not licensed in Alabama and you can't handle, and we're in Louisiana or Georgia, wherever that may be, it's essential. And so, letting people know that we're here, letting them know what we're doing, and letting them know that we're going to take care of those clients and treat them the way that they would want their clients to be treated so that they look good to their clients at the end of the day is extremely valuable to a new firm.
Thank you. With each new legal firm, it is essential to consider the legal compliance that must be addressed during the startup process. What legal considerations should new law firms be aware of when starting a new firm? Brendan.
Well, it's a little tough to give a specific answer to that question, and the reason being because there's such a variety of legal considerations to be aware of. I guess my advice would be to reach out to your local bar association to find out what help they can give you. I would also talk to other lawyers in your field that have started a firm. Do a little research, see who you can find, take them to lunch, and pick their brain. If you graduated from law school, I think you can figure out, which rules there are to comply with and help facilitate the growth of your business.
And you mentioned state bar associations. How can startups ensure compliance with state bar regulations and ethical guidelines, Aaron?
Yes. So the easiest way is, like Brendan said, just reaching out to them. A lot of people kind of view the state bar as being just a function of discipline and can be kind of scared to reach out to the bar. But, the bar is there to help you as a firm. The bar wants to see you comply with the rules and succeed as an attorney. I believe almost every state bar has literal practice guides, guides to new firm startups where it's a step-by-step process. Do you have your malpractice insurance? Have you complied with whatever the disciplinary board requires, et cetera? And so reach out to the bar, ask for help. They're there to help you. And we've found them to be a tremendous asset.
That's wonderful. Your law firm handles cases in 3 states. With that come jurisdictional challenges. What are the primary jurisdictional issues you face when handling cases across these multiple states, Brendan?
Well, as far as the jurisdictional issues are concerned, that's really on a case-by-case basis, and a state-by-state basis, really. Given the fact that we're in Louisiana, Alabama, and Georgia, there is a lot of overlap and connectivity in the states that we represent. You'd be surprised by how many cases we get in Alabama that are for accidents or situations in Louisiana, and in Louisiana that are in Georgia, and all across the board. So we get a lot of overlap by virtue of having a presence in each state. But I think as far as the jurisdictional issues, it really just kind of depends on the specific case in that situation at that time.
And it's very interesting. And not every day that we see attorneys like yourself handling cases and being licensed in all 3 states. That's amazing. How do differing state laws, when we compare Louisiana, Georgia, and Alabama, impact the strategy for handling a case, Aaron?
Yeah, so I guess to answer your question directly, it can have a huge impact on the case. There are situations where a client presents to us and they have a case that, based on the particular facts of the case, could be filed in either Louisiana or Alabama, or could be filed in Georgia or Alabama. And so it's our job as attorneys to evaluate the pros and cons of that client's options and to communicate to them, hey, this is where we think you should file because the laws on this particular issue are more favorable in this state, or vice versa. And that's a benefit that we add to our clients by being licensed, being able to file the cases in different states, and having a knowledge base of what advantages there may be to filing in any given state.
That's fantastic. What are the licensing requirements for attorneys to practice in multiple states, like the ones that you do, Brendan?
Well, the simple answer is you need to take the bar and pass it in each state to be licensed in that state. It's not always the case, though. For example, you can, if you're licensed in Louisiana but not in Georgia, you can work with a Georgia attorney who can pro hoc you in, such that it would allow you to work on that one case at that time. There are other states that have what's called reciprocity. Louisiana has it with Texas after 5 years, but that's about it. A state like New York has reciprocity with many other states. So, there are ways to get admitted into states through reciprocity without necessarily having to take the bar, but there are other legal requirements that you have to meet and pass in order to do so.
Aaron and Brendan kind of touched on that, but how can lawyers navigate the complexities of multi-state practice?
Yes, so the shortest answer is do your research, right? You gotta take the time. One of the most important rules of the rules of professional conduct is you got to be competent, right? You have to take the time to develop your competency and understand the laws in the state in which you are practicing. And one of the best assets that we found to do so is just the local plaintiffs bar association. Odds are if you have a question, someone else has had that question before and encountered it. And so, we're actively involved in the Alabama Association for Justice and the Louisiana Association for Justice, Georgia Trial Lawyers Association. And by virtue of our involvement in those organizations, we have access to, research that's been conducted. We have access to listservs and email chains where we can ask questions. But the shortest answer is you have to do your research and make sure that you fully understand the laws of the state in which your case is pending.
Good to know. Understanding local state law can be challenging for new practicing attorneys, as you know. How can attorneys ensure they're well versed in the laws and regulations of each of those states that they practice at? Brendan.
Well, if you pass the bar and you're licensed in that state, you should already probably be pretty well versed in those laws and regulations. But to piggyback again on Aaron, do your research and make sure that you understand the laws and regulations and get active in the plaintiff's bar. And like we said earlier in this podcast, use it as a crutch. And use it to help you navigate those areas that you're not as comfortable with or that you need help getting more clarity on.
Mm-hmm. Aaron, when it comes to client communication, how should attorneys communicate with clients about the implications of multi-state legal issues?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer to your question is the same way you would communicate with your client about a case that's, just involves one state. Client communication is everything. So just keeping your client up to speed, making sure they understand whatever options are available to them if they do have a case where the laws of multiple states are involved. But just staying in touch with the clients, keeping them up to date, and making sure you are fully communicating their options, regardless of what state their case is pending in.
Mm-hmm. And Brendan, you mentioned co-counsel. So when is it necessary to involve local counsel, and how can attorneys effectively collaborate with them?
That's a good question. I think it depends entirely on the type of case you have and where that case needs to be filed or where the situation is pending. For example, in New Orleans, I've practiced enough in Baton Rouge that I've been before the judges, I've been before the jury. I'm comfortable in that courtroom. But if I have a case in North Louisiana, in a smaller parish, where they may not like the big city lawyer, and they might want a local counsel, then I need to consider that and do my research ahead of time and say, hey, if I don't have somebody who is based in this city, we're going to get home cooked here. So it might be to my advantage and my client's advantage to bring on a local lawyer to help us make a presence in the courtroom and really kind of get the results that we need out of that case.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Aaron, based on your experience, what are the key considerations in establishing a working relationship with local attorneys in those different states that you practice?
Yes, so similar to the considerations for maintaining good relationships with your clients, and that's just communication. I think it's incredibly important when you start out a new case with a co-counsel that you identify and outline what each attorney's responsibility is going to be in the case, and that you continue to communicate with them and keep them in the loop as the case progresses. The last thing that a local counsel ever wants is to have to show up to a hearing and not know what's going on with the case. So keeping them in the loop, treating them obviously with respect and like a part of the team, and continuing to communicate with them throughout the duration of the case are probably the key components to maintaining a healthy relationship with your co-counsel.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more. Brendan, what advice would you give to firms that want to ensure consistent case management practices across different jurisdictions?
Well, I would say communication is key, as well as organization. I would say if you are able to have a staff early on as a young startup, make sure they're well trained and make sure that, if you're in multiple states, that everybody knows what their roles and responsibilities are in that state, and be aware of any pitfalls and differences between the court rules in those respective states, because sometimes that could trip you up. But I think as long as you're communicating, as long as you stay organized, you'll be able to take care of it and be okay at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. When facing an ethical dilemma, how should attorneys address potential conflicts of interest that may arise in multi-state practices, Aaron?
Yeah. So again, contact the bar. The bar's there to help. Most states, if not every state, um, has an option where you can contact the disciplinary board of that state and present to them a hypothetical question, and kind of say, hey, suppose a lawyer runs into this situation. What are the lawyer's rights, duties, responsibilities, et cetera? And the disciplinary board will actually give you an opinion that you can use and rely on in making your decision of how to handle that potential conflict. If you're not satisfied there or you're still concerned, there's plenty of attorneys who specialize in nothing other than legal ethics, and you could always retain one to help guide you through a certain situation. But the best advice that I could give an attorney with a potential conflict is to just proceed with caution and to make sure that you're taking advantage of all of the resources that are available to ensure that you comply with each and every state's requirements when it comes to addressing conflicts.
These are truly wonderful tips, Aaron. This was so great. I hope our discussion about multi-state practice and strategies for a successful law firm startup was informative and educational. And as promised, I have a few pop-up questions for you, my dears. You ready?
Sure.
All right, Brendan, let's start with you. What's your biggest pet peeve in legal communication or courtroom etiquette?
I like that question. I think, civility amongst attorneys is what I would say. Our field, our industry is tough enough as it is. And, I think there are times we have to be very strong advocates for our clients. But I think it's important to do that while maintaining respect, and a working relationship with other attorneys. There's nothing I hate more than, an attorney who's always playing the tough guy, and I need to call him to talk about scheduling a deposition, and I know it's just going to be an extra long conversation, just because this is the way that he is, or this is the way he's posturing, So I would say that's my biggest pet peeve. I think it's much nicer when we can all collaborate, work together, and still represent our clients to the best of our abilities.
That's wonderful. I love it. Aaron, what's the most bizarre case you've ever encountered in your legal career so far?
Oh, that's a tough question. I don't know. I don't know about a bizarre case, but I'll tell you a story about one case that immediately comes to mind. When I was fresh out of law school, I had an opportunity to represent a woman who had tragically lost her husband as a result of a wreck with an 18-wheeler. And she was asked to come and speak at the grand jury hearing where it would be determined whether the driver of the 18-wheeler was going to face criminal charges as a result of the wreck. And immediately prior to the hearing, the criminal defense attorney approached me and said that his client would like to speak with my client. He wanted to apologize and asked if my client would be willing to do so. And so I pulled her aside and I talked to her and I said, this is the situation. You don't have to do this, but if you want to, he's asking to speak. And she said, no, I want to do it. And for context, this woman was, maybe 5 feet tall, little bitty thing. And, here we are on the courthouse steps and up walks a guy who's every bit of, 6'2", 6'3", and they kind of just have this moment where they stand and square off in front of each other. And then this big guy just falls into my client's arms and starts crying, and she catches him and he says, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And she just says, it's okay. I forgive you. And she actually ends up exchanging phone numbers with the guy, telling him to call her anytime. She tells the district attorney's office that she doesn't want to pursue charges. And it's just this incredible moment of forgiveness and love, frankly, on the courthouse steps. And as I'm walking to my car leaving that day, the criminal defense attorney approached me and said, Aaron, I'm going to teach you one of the most important things about practicing law, and that is if you help me, I help you. And he hands me a file, and in that file were a number of requests that this driver had made to the company to pull over and sleep the night before, where he had been complaining about driving too many hours, all kinds of things that just really shed a lot of light on what was going on at that company and put us in a position to obtain a wonderful settlement for her and her family and really make a difference. And none of that would have happened without just this incredible moment of forgiveness. And so sometimes, you go into a case thinking you need one thing, and it's the complete opposite that completely flips the case. So that's what sticks out.
That's such a touching story. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. Again, that was attorneys Aaron Maples and Brendan Connick with Maples Connick Gulf Coast trial lawyers in Louisiana, Alabama, and Georgia. And if anybody is looking for your advice, how to start a new law firm, or God forbid is injured in an accident, how can they find you?
Sure. The easiest way is probably our website, and that's just www.maplesconnick.com. We're also on social media at Maples Connick. And yeah, if you need anything at all, feel free to reach out anytime.
I want to thank you all for listening and watching our story today. For more tips and tricks on legal funding and personal injury law and medicine related topics, follow me, download, like, and subscribe for it's time for More Injury Funding podcast on several podcast platforms worldwide. And follow More Injury Funding on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Pinterest, YouTube, Google Business Profile, and my website at moreinjuryfunding.com. I can't wait to see you, my dear listeners and viewers, on my next upcoming episode. Tune in for our next guest soon. Until then, be well. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay.